Hi everyone, it's Blake again with Northwinds Wilderness School. I've been trying to avoid social media as much as possible lately, and it's for a lot of reasons. I don't like reading about politics. I don't really care what your political beliefs are. And one of the things that really bothers me is this question of what makes the best knife. It's a question that gets asked a lot, and there's no answer to it. It's an unanswerable question. But in Northwinds Wilderness School, we have this idea that we call the root skills. The root skills are a set of 7 skills that we think every person should have, regardless of your background, regardless of your lifestyle, regardless of who you are. It's 7 things that we believe everybody should be able to do. And, you know, there's a lot more than 7 skills that everyone should have, but these 7 are the ones that we have focused on because they fall solidly within the realm of what we do and what our beliefs are. The 7 skills that I'm talking about are fire making, shelter building, basic first aid, basic knife skills, basic plant identification, and 2 others that are basic wilderness survival for 72 hours, and what's the third one? I don't remember what and cordage. All 7 of these skills are at the foundation of being able to do things for yourself, and at the very, very basis of relationship with nature. We have found many, many times that people will come to us, they don't want to take a basic knife skills class, but then they want to sign up for a class that requires them to have knife skills. And when they get there, they have no idea what they're doing. So they expect us, people will sign up for a bow making class or a trap making class and expect them to teach us how to use a knife. Or they'll show up to a trap making class or a bow making class not knowing how to use a knife and just start going to town. And it gets really scary, it gets really dangerous, and it's kind of embarrassing. So I'm not going to try to teach you basic knife skills today. There's just a couple things that I want to talk about. The first thing is going to go back to what I mentioned earlier about what is the best knife. And I'm hoping that in the next minute or so I can illustrate to you what I meant when I said this is an unanswerable question. I have several knives that I like to work with. Unfortunately, the knife that I carry the most is I couldn't find. I have no idea where it is. So I'm going to start with this one. This is the knife that I carry every single day when I'm not in the woods. You can see it's nothing fancy. It's basically a paring knife. The blade's a little over 2 inches long. It's got a comfortable wooden handle. You can tell that I've used it a couple times because it's not pretty anymore. I hope you guys can hear that. The lake ice is cracking and it's kind of cool. This is the knife that I carry and use the most often. It's very comfortable to hold. It's got a short, usable blade with a nice sharp edge and a nice sharp point. And like I said, it's basically a paring knife, like what you'd use in your kitchen. The next one is the Mora Bushcraft Black. I have no association to Mora. This is just a knife that I really like. The Mora Companion also works really well. I like the handle better on this one. It's got this nice soft rubber handle, and it's got a 90-degree spine on it that you can use for shaving wood and also for starting fires. Now let's compare these two. They really have nothing in common. There's nothing similar between these 2 knives except that they both have a point and a cutting edge. The next one that I really like catches a lot of people off guard. This is a Japanese kiridashi. It's a woodworking blade from Japan that's basically like a utility knife for carpenters. They use them for scribing lines. They use them for shaving off pieces of wood to make them fit more perfectly together or to shape something more perfectly. And it's basically just a piece of 1095 steel with an edge ground onto it. I love this knife, and we'll get into it in a little while. The other one that I carry a lot when I'm in the woods or when I'm camping is just a very simple finished puko. It's got this big pommel. The big pommel is so that you can pull it out of the sheath with heavy mittens or gloves on, but it also creates a cool grip. I like the short blade. I like the Scandi grind. It holds a good edge, and it makes it easy to resharpen. And then it's got a good point on it for drilling, poking, and prying. You know, a knife is meant to be functional, not pretty, although this one is kind of both. The thing that I like about all these blades is that they're very functional. They're easy to work with. They're comfortable in your hand. And none of them were expensive. You know, maybe someday I'll do a video about what makes a good knife or what makes a bad knife, but that's not what we're doing today. These are the knives that I like. Let's leave it to that. So I want to talk a little bit about some basic knife skills and some of the common mistakes that I see people make. I'll use the Mora to start with. So two of the biggest mistakes that I see people making are they try to push the knife into their cut without using the full length of the blade. The full length of the blade in a slicing motion makes your carving much easier and much more accurate. The other thing I see people doing is they get pushed into a cut and the knife goes wild. You know, my knife is going 3 feet away from where I'm working, and the point of this thing is sharp. So if there's anyone over here, it will hurt them. So the remedies to those two situations are to angle your knife and use the whole length of the cutting edge. That reduces the amount of pressure you have to put behind your cut. It lessens the arc of your, whatever it's called, your swing. And it uses the knife more efficiently. So I can take pretty deep cuts with very little swing. The next answer is going to be, don't take deep cuts. There are very few instances in which you need to make a deep cut. You know, I can take that much, that much, that much, that much, and I've just used much less effort than trying to do something like this all in one cut. The next trick I want to talk to you about is what I call driving the blade with your thumb. And to do this, I'm going to hold the knife in my strong hand, which in my case is the left hand. I'm going to put the index finger of my right hand below where I'm cutting, and my thumb is on the back of the blade. And now I'm driving that blade into the cut. I'm driving that blade into the cut, and most of the pressure is coming from this thumb, not the hand holding the knife. So I'm driving that blade into the cut. I'm driving that blade into the cut. Now, this, just carving a point on a stick, is one of the most basic things that we do. All right, I'm just gonna switch knives. I'm gonna go to the puko. The next thing I want to talk to you is about what's called a chest crutch. And this is for those very rare times when you do have to make a deep cut. If you're trying to cut in, you know, a 1/2 inch of wood like this, you're putting a lot of pressure behind it. You're potentially doing a lot of damage out here. But the chest crutch kind of takes a lot of that pressure off of you. So what we're going to do is turn the knife backwards in our hand. We're going to get into our cut, angle the blade away from your chest and neck, and then we're going to use the strength of our shoulders to get in there and cut these big pieces off. You'll notice the knife barely moves at all. I'll do it again. We're digging in, and then we're using our shoulders. Now I'm taking huge chunks of wood off, and I'm not risking hurting anyone. And by utilizing the big muscles in my shoulders and upper arms, I'm not wearing out my hands and wrists. This is called the chest crutch. It's a very effective, very safe, very common carving technique. If you need to make points, or if you want to make a chisel point, let me just really quick make a chisel point for you using the chest crutch. I'm cutting through all that rotten wood, getting down to the solid. So whether you're making traps or shelters or whatever it is you're making when you're carving, this is what we call a chisel point. It's one of the basic movements in carving. And you'll notice I drove the blade with my thumb a few times towards the end there, but really I did that whole thing using that chest crutch. So remember, you turn the blade backwards, bury the handle into your chest with the blade and point aiming away from you, and use those big muscles in your upper arms and shoulders to pull the blade. The next thing I want to talk to you about is what's called a 7-notch, and I'm going to use this kiridashi to do it. A 7-notch is super common in trap building, but that's really the only place I've ever see people use it. So for a 7-notch, what we're going to do is cut straight down into this stick. And then we're going to very carefully, driving the blade with our thumb, cut to our shelf. So this flat surface is called the shelf. This is called the groove. And by now, it should be starting to become apparent why we call it a 7-notch. When we're talking about trap making, we'll usually say to cut halfway through the wood, but not more than halfway through the wood. Notice I'm still using my thumb to drive the blade. That gives me more control. There's the obvious 7 shape. And you'll notice this shelf is either perfectly straight up and down or maybe a little tiny bit hooked. In trap making, if it's a little bit hooked, that trap will be a little bit more difficult to trigger, so less sensitive. If you can get that shelf straight up and down, your trap will be more sensitive. And then we've got this long swoop. This would be where 2 pieces of wood come together. For instance, your chisel point could sit right in there if we were making a figure 4 deadfall. The last technique I'm going to cover is called a square to round. Or I'm sorry, it's called a round to square reduction. And the only time per se that I can think of that this is a functional cut is in the making of a figure 4 deadfall. But it could be used in shelter building on a larger scale, or maybe making like a small cage or bird trap. And mostly what this is a practice in knife control. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by cutting straight down into the stick. And then we're going to start off the same way we started with our 7. Again, notice I'm using my thumb to drive the blade. Now, on the opposite end here, I'm going to make another cut straight down. I'm going to turn my stick around. The sound of that lake ice is so cool. I love it. Now, if I were to just leave this like this, that's what's called a log cabin notch, which is what you use for stacking the logs in a cabin. But to make the round to square reduction, I'm now going to turn this corner 90 degrees and make a cut straight down. Notice how I'm rocking that blade rather than just trying to push it in. This is all about control, about not hurting yourself or anyone else. Now, again, I'm going to start off basically making a 7-notch. Notice, I'm using my thumb to drive the blade, and I'm still using the full length of the blade. Slicing is easier than pushing. The less effort you put into this, the safer you're going to be. Now, I'm rocking that blade into my straight cut, and I'm driving the blade with my thumb, and I'm using the entire length of the blade. I'm slicing the wood, not chiseling it. Now we're going to turn another 90-degree corner. And seeing as how I'm already working on this side, I'm just going to work on this side. It doesn't matter where you start. I'm going to drive the blade with my thumb. I'm going to use the full length of the blade and slice. The beginning looks very much like a 7-notch. I'm going to turn this stick around. I'm going to rock into that 90-degree cut. I'm going to use my thumb to drive that blade. I'm going to slice, not chisel. Don't ever cut towards yourself. Away. Now for this fourth cut, I'm going to connect the lines. So you see, I have a cut here and a cut here, and they're not 100% even, but they're pretty close. So what I'm going to do is connect them. And then I'm going to use that same technique. Cut away the debris. Drive with the thumb, cut away the debris. Then I'm going to flip that stick around. Oops, I almost forgot this part. Rock into that top shelf. Drive the blade with the thumb, using the entire length of that blade. Now, I have reduced a round stick to a square. This can be used for interlocking sticks, for building a shelter, for building a cabin, for making a cage, for building a trap, but mostly it's an exercise in controlling the knife. If you're going to do anything in bushcrafting, rewilding, wilderness survival, outdoor skills, primitive living skills, one of the first things you need to learn is how to safely and effectively work a knife. You need to move the knife right. You need to hold it right. You need to use both hands. You need to use the right muscles. If you start trying to make bow drill kits or figure 4 deadfalls or build shelters and you don't know how to control a knife, you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to hurt someone else. You're going to think your equipment isn't working, and you're going to potentially damage your equipment. This is one of the most fundamental skills that there is in the outdoor world. You know, I carry a pocket knife every day, everywhere I go, and I carry this almost every day, almost everywhere I go. And after 30 plus years of working in the wilderness of my life, of camping, of hunting, of fishing, of hiking, of being outdoors, of practicing wilderness survival, of being on my rewilding journey, I still take the time to sit and practice my knife skills. I do tri-sticks, which were invented by Morris Kohansky. I sit and make figure 4 deadfalls. I make the Arapuca bird trap. I look for opportunities to practice my knife skills because it's so fundamental and it's so important. The reason that so many people on these forums ask, what's the best knife? What knife should I buy? How much should I spend on a knife? Is because it is the basis of many of the other things we do. Please take the time to learn how to use your knife properly. I don't care if you learn it from me or from someone else, or if you take a class or watch a video or practice on your own. Take the time to get good at this. It's very, very important. Thank you for watching. Thank you for spending your time with us. If you learned anything from this video or if you found any value in it, please find a friend to share it with. Otherwise, thank you very much. I'll see you next time. Have a good day.